This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. There's a lot of delicious content in this show, but nothing you see here is cake. You're gonna have to take our word for it. In tonight's show, we dive in deep into the debate over reopening schools in this pandemic, plus how becoming a US citizen looks a little different in 2020. But first, here's the latest. Florida just recorded 15,000 new COVID-19 cases, by far the record for the most new daily cases any state has seen since the beginning of the pandemic. While testing has, of course, increased, hospitalizations are also surging, as Miami-Dade and Palm Beach County are hardest hit. Texas has become another hotspot, particularly in Houston, where one judge called for a stay-at-home order until case numbers go down. Texas Governor Greg Abbott put a statewide mask mandate into effect Friday, something Austin's mayor says was needed weeks ago.
I think the lesson to be learned in Texas is you cannot open up the economy in ways that looked like the economy was open before.
A U.S. Navy ship exploded over the weekend, injuring more than 50 people, and the fire could continue to burn for days. It happened Sunday at a U.S. naval base in San Diego. Investigators are still trying to figure out how the fire started on board the USS Bonhomme Richard. It was docked and undergoing maintenance at the time of the explosion. All crew members have been accounted for, while 5 people remain in the hospital. And 17 states plus DC are all joining a legal effort to block a new rule revoking visas for international students who attend classes remotely. The Trump administration said last week that foreign students would need to return to their home countries even if they qualify for a student visa. States and colleges are challenging that rule in court, saying it would prevent students from completing their studies and would force many into a dangerous position as they try to retain visas a long time in the works. 3 teachers in Arizona followed safety recommendations as they taught together, but all 3 eventually contracted the coronavirus, and one of the teachers died. Newsy's Patrick Terpstra took a closer look at what happened in that Arizona classroom and what that might say about the safety of schools.
We taught a week of summer school together.
Jenna Martinez says she and 2 other teachers in rural Arizona followed safety guidelines as they taught virtual summer school in the same classroom. All 3 still got the coronavirus.
We did everything we were supposed to do. And 2 of us were able to come out of it. 1 of us was not.
Longtime teacher Kimberly Bird was the first to test positive. She died from the virus June 26th.
We lost a treasure. We lost a highly respected educator and mother and one of my best friends.
Where the 3 picked up the virus isn't known, but medical experts told us it is possible the teachers spread COVID to each other in the classroom, even with masks, sanitizing, and social distancing.
She was 100% on board with whatever needed to be done.
It is a frustrating reality as schools look to open again this fall. The virus can be a threat even with the best precautions.
It is surprising these teachers seem to be doing all the right things, but still got sick.
We can reduce the chance of getting COVID-19. We can reduce it a lot by adhering to these protocols, but zero chance of COVID-19 in a school? No, it will never happen.
Ali Mokdad at the University of Washington says what happened to the 3 teachers shows schools need to plan for infections after opening.
Schools, we can open them. I am no doubt in my mind. The question is, can we keep them open?
He says the key to lowering risk of the virus in school is to fight it outside school.
You cannot open your school unless you control the pandemic outside your school in the neighborhood.
And yet, Mokdad and other experts say there are drawbacks to keeping kids in virtual classes, and not just academic atrophy, known as the COVID slide.
There are 20 million kids who depend on school breakfast and lunch. There are kids who get critical special educational services. It is a good goal to have to be able to reopen schools as much as possible, as safely as possible.
Teacher Jenna Martinez, still recovering from the virus, says reopening schools to children now seems too risky.
I know school has to happen. I ask for the public to please have that confidence and support educators and know that we have the kids' best interest at heart. And number 1 has to be their health.
Patrick Terpstra, Newsy, Washington.
When you're back, we'll dive into some of the more alternative content people have been tweeting about.
Miss getting email that isn't junk? You should know about Newsy's daily newsletter. It's breaking news right to your inbox. Get caught up quick with the best Newsy stories every day. Join us at signup.newsy.com. Be informed, not influenced.
I did not think it would be this difficult for me to obtain a medical abortion.
Why can't you pick this pill up in a pharmacy?
It has real risks for the mom.
It's a bureaucracy.
I felt like nobody was going to be able to help me.
There's no way in heck we could put most of these trending topics at the beginning of the show, but we definitely didn't want to leave them out. Here's what's trending. Washington, D.C. is trending because the powers that be finally decided that the old football team name, which was a racial slur, was no longer in vogue after 87 years. An announcement on the replacement name has been held up because of trademark issues, but if the Washington football leadership wants to go in a very different direction, they can just hop on Twitter and run through ideas like the Washington "So Who Do You Work For's?", the Washington Peppa Pigskins, or the Washington things that don't look like cakes, but when you cut them open, they are cakes, which unfortunately leads us to our next trending topic. This is a meme that combines two incredibly potent forces on the internet: viral food videos and Twitter's insatiable sense of morbid curiosity. Specifically curiosity around whether that super real looking item someone's cutting into will actually turn out to be a cake. If you think this is weird, well, it is, but admit it, it's also kind of fascinating. And for many Twitterers, it's pretty trippy too, because if this could be a cake, couldn't anything be a cake? Couldn't this mug be a cake? Someone stop this madness. And okay, so this was trending over the weekend more than today, but come on. Could not talk about it. Jada and Will, the Smiths, were all over the web because of something that isn't really any of our business, but they decided to make it public anyway.
I got into an entanglement with August. That's what I said.
An entanglement?
Yes.
Aside from giving us new language for describing relationships, Jada and Will revealed that years ago, they were separated, and during that time, Jada had a relationship with R&B singer August Alsina. The Jada and Will Red Table Talk was intriguing, to say the least. The two have clearly been through some stuff, but they don't mind joking about it, and they definitely gave us some memeable moments.
We ride together,
we die together.
Bad marriage for life.
The coronavirus pandemic has, in many ways, brought the world to a halt and delayed citizenship ceremonies for more than 100,000 immigrants wanting to officially become American citizens. Those ceremonies have resumed in a socially distanced sort of way, but the residual delays might put voting out of reach for hundreds of thousands of prospective citizens. Newsy's Ben Shamiso explains.
Did she just swear or affirm to that?
This is what becoming a U.S. citizen looks like in the coronavirus era. U.S. immigration officials have resumed citizenship oath ceremonies across the country, though in smaller-sized groups.
I'm very happy the way they are, handling it with safely.
That's good news for the more than 100,000 immigrants who were cleared to naturalize before the pandemic, but have been waiting for ceremonies to restart.
How great is it that they're making this opportunity available, that I don't have to wait?
For nearly 3 months, the Trump administration canceled most citizenship interviews and ceremonies, saying they wanted to keep applicants and staff safe during the pandemic. At the same time, immigration officials rejected bipartisan calls to administer the oath of allegiance remotely because of, quote, logistical challenges and security concerns. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency that oversees legal immigration, tells Newsy it's working around the clock to make up for the lost time. But analysts estimate that hundreds of thousands of people who were on track to gain citizenship in time to vote in the 2020 election may now miss out on that opportunity.
It's a few 100,000 people that USCIS would have to complete various procedures for in time for the election at a time when they don't appear to have the resources to do that.
That could impact some swing states on election day.
The margins were really, really close in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin last time. And, even a few thousand might make a difference there, or it could have a big impact as in Florida. There are a lot of people naturalizing there, even possibly Arizona or Texas.
The naturalization delays could soon get worse. USCIS is facing a budget crisis that's threatening to largely shut down all immigration services. Because it's running out of money, the agency is set to furlough roughly 70% of its workforce on August 3rd, unless Congress gives it $1.2 billion in emergency funding.
That means everything that we do is going to be dramatically slowed down and delayed. So it could be citizenship, it could be somebody adjusting status to get a green card, it could be an asylum application.
Michael Knowles is the president of a union that represents 2,500 USCIS employees in the Washington, D.C. area. He wants the American public to fully grasp how nearly shutting down USCIS would deeply affect the nation.
Our agriculture, high-tech industry, every business that employs immigrants who are authorized to work, all of those economic parts of our economic system will suffer.
USCIS is almost entirely funded by the fees it collects from immigrants' applications. The agency says it needs a bailout because the pandemic greatly reduced applications. But experts say the Trump administration's restrictive immigration policies and emphasis on vetting are the main reason for the agency's financial woes.
They're spending more with the increased vetting, and they're taking in less because fewer people are applying, and this had already created a deficit even before the pandemic.
USCIS tells Newsy that in the event of a furlough, we will continue to conduct naturalization ceremonies, but we anticipate it will be on a more limited basis. Ben Chamiso, Newsy, Chicago.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. To our repeat customers, don't stop.
As coronavirus spreads across the country, you might be looking for ways to make sense of it all. Newsy's here to help with some deeper context, explaining and reporting on the pandemic. Virology, only on Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
Late last month, the New York Times reported that Russia was secretly offering bounties to Afghan militants to kill Americans in Afghanistan. Since then, President Trump has dismissed the reporting and called the whole thing a hoax. In this next piece, Newsy's Sasha Ingber spoke to two people in charge of daily briefings for former presidents to explain just why President Trump's dismissal of the bounty scheme is so unusual.
None of the four former national security officials who testified before the House Foreign Affairs Committee on Thursday believed President Donald Trump's claim that he wasn't briefed on intelligence about a Russian threat to U.S. troops in Afghanistan.
Even if it was only vaguely clear from the raw intelligence that the Russians might be paying bounties for the killing of American soldiers, that information would have made its way to the highest levels of the United States government, including the president, before the analysts concluded their work.
The president continues to dismiss the assessment as his administration investigates who leaked information to journalists.
It's people in so-called intelligence. I don't know if it's intelligence or the opposite of that word. As far as the bounty is concerned, I think it's a hoax. I think it's a Democrat hoax because intelligence, good people in intelligence, said that they did not think it rose to the level of bringing it to the president.
Newsy spoke to David Priest, a former CIA daily briefer who served under President George W. Bush, and Robert Cardillo, who managed and delivered the president's daily briefs to President Barack Obama. Both expressed concern about President Trump's response.
It is outside the norm of presidential behavior. I'll put it that way.
If you ask me if I'm surprised that he's willing to overlook this, then the answer is no. It seems to be a pattern. And unfortunately, it's one that tends to give the benefit of the doubt to our adversary.
Russia denies that its military intelligence agency offered money to the Afghan Taliban. The top U.S. general in the Middle East told reporters he sent the intelligence guys back to continue to dig on it. Mark Esper, the defense secretary, testified that he had knowledge of payments, but not bounties per se. And a core argument among the president and his political allies that there was no consensus among U.S. spy agencies.
We now know that there was no definitive intelligence. There was strong dissent within the intelligence community.
Briefers say that's common, especially with the president's daily brief, which traces back to 1946 and President Harry Truman.
If it's in the PDB in the first place, it has some certain level of credibility, or it wouldn't be brought up. The idea of verifying everything before it's presented to the president, that actually goes against the purpose of intelligence. The whole point of intelligence is to get the president early information, to get him ahead of decisions so that he's not waiting until something has already happened before acting on it.
Lawmakers have questions for the Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, and the president's briefer, Beth Sanner, who made a rare appearance at an event this week.
I truly also care about everyone with whom I serve, and if you are not ready to put other people first, you are not ready to be a leader.
I really feel for her because she's in a tough position. It's been so now skewed that if you bring something to the president that doesn't comport with his worldview, by definition, you're part of the deep state, or you're part of the never Trumpers.
The bounty allegation comes after President Trump endorsed Russia rejoining the G7 and planned to scale down troops in Germany, prompting fears of Russian expansion. Former CIA officers also recently said the president directed them to share intelligence with Russians in counterterrorism efforts.
What are the other blockbuster stories? What are the other major threats to U.S. national security that the president may have never read and may have never been briefed on? That, to me, is something that may come out with more and more time.
Sasha Ingber, Newsy, Washington.
For many people who have survived the coronavirus, the journey doesn't stop when the virus is no longer present. We'll tell you more when you're back.
There's 3 American girls competing for the top 2 Olympic spots.
I could go into this and come out with nothing.
As coronavirus spreads across the country, you might be looking for ways to make sense of it all. Newsy's here to help with some deeper context, explaining and reporting on the pandemic. Virology, only on Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
As more young adults test positive for the coronavirus, doctors are discovering other complications linked to the recovery. Lindsay Thies shows us some of the problems they're seeing in people under 50.
Lord, I don't want to die. I got so much to live for.
The fever came out of nowhere.
It felt like a cement block was just sitting on my chest.
We've heard about COVID-19 related breathing problems or fever, but doctors are warning about long-term recovery complications of COVID-19 patients, especially those under 50.
People do need to pay attention to this.
Dr. Mark Rupp is the chief of infectious diseases at Nebraska Medical Center.
Even if you're younger and you don't have those comorbid conditions, you can get sick and you can get seriously ill or even lose your life.
Especially young patients show this hyperinflammation also leads to what we call hypercoagulability, which means the blood clots. And this leads to a cardiac arrest.
Dr. Phil Stahill's hospital saw some of the largest COVID-19 case numbers in Colorado in March. Many patients are home now, but are still recovering.
Some of these patients come in, talk, and die within an hour from an acute cardiac arrest. And even after their recovery, we've seen patients and horrendous stories.
He says about 25% of younger patients show a different pattern of infection, inflammation that knocks out a patient's organs. In some instances, patients have had heart failure, heart attack, stroke, kidney failure, or even pressure sores on their skin.
It starts with redness around the skin, then the skin breaks down, and subsequent to that, the wound could get deeper all the way to the bone. What we've seen in the COVID patients, that this happens within days, and it can't be stopped. And you end up with a huge hole in your back that goes all the way down to bone and needs to be covered with plastic surgery.
The recovery for COVID-19 patients lasts several weeks or even months in some cases, doctors say. They've also mentioned mental and cognitive weakness, kidney replacement, and lung transplants. But
But recovery is possible. Jason Jahanian, a marathon runner, has been recovering since contracting the coronavirus in April. He was on a ventilator for 14 days and ECMO for 11. He recently hiked a 14,000-foot peak in the Rocky Mountains.
Any improvement is an improvement. And although we all may be improving at different rates, as long as you're improving, as long as you're pushing yourself, you will get there.
Jahanian is quick to note he considers himself a remarkable exception and that he still has a month's worth of blood clotting medication to go through. He also plans to care for his mental health as he suffered from something called COVID delirium.
The mental health part is extremely, extremely important. Not only are you seeing life through a new lens, a more appreciative lens, but also those dark memories, although they've faded a bit over time, they're still there. You can't help but think about some of those feelings and dreams and hallucinations you went through. They still rear their heads occasionally, but it gets better.
A lot of young patients may not get really sick from that infection, but we still don't know who does and who doesn't. And until we know who is at risk and until we have a vaccine, the only way to keep the community safe is to be respectful by wearing masks, social distancing, and most importantly, avoiding large crowd indoor gathering, which is probably the single root cause of the current surge we see in the southern and southeastern states at this time.
Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
It's not just the United States that's seeing a surge in coronavirus cases. Other countries with fewer resources are also struggling. In this next story, we take a look at the conditions in South Africa and India.
Coronavirus cases in South Africa have doubled in just 2 weeks, and India is seeing its biggest daily increase yet. These rising case numbers are highlighting challenges for poorer countries during the pandemic. Wealthy countries are stockpiling medical equipment for private hospitals, while public hospitals in poor countries are unable to obtain needed resources. According to the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, public hospitals are also seeing a higher proportion of deaths compared to private hospitals. Africa's public hospitals are running short on oxygen concentrators that are needed to help patients short of breath. Some COVID-19 patients have been forced to heated tents in the hospital parking lots, though the country is in the midst of a cold front. Meanwhile, patients are also crowding into public hospitals in India, with many unable to afford private care. In the state of Delhi, which includes the capital city of New Delhi, patients have died after being turned away from COVID-designated hospitals that are filled to capacity. This has led to 500 railway cars being converted into makeshift hospital wards. Cases in India have been doubling each of the last 3 weeks. Both India and South Africa are also facing shortages of healthcare workers. Half of the 8,000 medical professionals across Africa have been infected with the virus. New Delhi's health minister says a lack of trained and experienced staff is a major challenge. According to Johns Hopkins University, more than 12.5 million people have been infected with the virus globally, and over 560,000 have died. India ranks 3rd in the world in COVID cases, and South Africa 11th. For Newsy, I'm Gage Jackson.
That's it for our show tonight. If you made it through this Monday, go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back. If things were a little rocky, then you've got another chance to get things sorted. We'll do this all over again tomorrow, same time, same place. Stay here for more top stories from Newsy right now.